we didn't have any real savings. None of us spoke Chinese. We got our master's degree from google.com. We were tired of our top level talent getting poached. We're just going to hire it in the where you're able to, get an extremely solid hire for 70% in cost savings.
Thanks for tuning in to The Humble Venture. This is a podcast where we get to talk to entrepreneurs, high-performing talent, and industry leaders. We get to ask them everything about how they got to where they are, the things they learned along their journey, and what tips and tricks they would like to share with the world from their own niches and perspectives. So we hope you enjoyed this episode. Please give us a like, give us a follow, leave a comment if you enjoy it. And here's a bit more about today's guest. Enjoy. Today we talked to Sean Agatep, the co-founder of Venturo, an 8-figure D2C brand that started back in 2014, and co-founder of Higher Title, top talent recruiting offshore that can save you up to 80% on talent. Give it a listen. We'll hear how he started out in China.
All right, we are live. So, hey, Sean, thank you so much for joining the podcast. Super excited to have you here. And yeah, tell me super briefly for people who don't know you, including myself, just like very brief story about you.
Yeah, sure. So quick backstory about myself and my partners. I moved out to China in 2010, the summer after we graduated college from Gonzaga University, a small basketball school up in Spokane, Washington. My partners and I moved out there together because we didn't really want to get real jobs. The economy wasn't great. We're all business majors. And then we basically caught the entrepreneurial bug. And where we were living in China, we subsidized our income by teaching English on the weekends, and then basically failed at starting businesses until something stuck, as 22, 23-year-olds do. So we started to get into product development, sourcing, manufacturing. That's what triggered Chero. We started that in 2014 and scaled it up to 8 figures after a couple of years, and have been running it ever since. We've got a recruiting agency as well, and then we're going to be spinning out a couple more brands here over the next few years.
It sounds like a very crazy story, and it sounds like you're a very busy person who has a lot going on. So from graduating to China to now having 2 businesses, one of them you said in the 8 figures, that feels like crazy in just 15 years. I'd love to kind of like get in your mind and maybe go down memory lane with you. Like what was the craziest thing about moving to China? Like how much savings did you have? Like, was that like a crazy move for you, or was it an okay thing?
Yeah. So in hindsight, it was pretty ridiculous. We didn't have any real savings. None of us spoke Chinese. We moved to Guangzhou, China, which no one really moves there for the weather. It's the 3rd largest city in China. It's a big manufacturing hub. But one of our roommates had studied abroad in Shanghai, and actually 6 of us, our house of our 6 best friends, we all moved out to China together. So it was kind of cheating the way we did it, because you were able to have like second college, right? Like we all moved over there together, and stuff would happen. You'd be like, holy shit, this just happened to me. That happened to you guys? And you're like, yeah, what does that mean? And like, we'd all figure it out together. But it was a wild ride. It was a fun experience. It was definitely a young man's game in doing it, in that grind. But it was a benefit in the end as well, starting our professional careers out there, because we just cut our teeth and learned how to get stuff done. And, we got our master's degree from google.com because we get in these interactions and these meetings with people, and then all of a sudden, like, we wouldn't know what any of that means. And so we'd go back and we'd look it up and we'd figure out how to get it done, and then just go from there.
Yeah, that's great. I can definitely relate to getting your education from Google. That's definitely
Right.
how I did it my way as well. Okay, so 6 of you basically went to China. How long were the 6 of you there?
Longest tenure was 5 years. There was 3 or 4 of us that made it like 4 or 5 years. But I think the coolest part about it is that so 2 of my partners are a part of that 6, and then our other buddies who were a group of that 6, they all kind of ended up doing their own thing, but we're all still really good friends, and we're all still best friends, and like hanging out and like be, being able to like have a small entrepreneurial circle that also is your best friends from college has been a huge life hack, especially in just like being able to plan vacations together and being able to go around and everyone's in different parts of the world. So you're able to just keep that global network alive.
Yeah, that's definitely amazing. I feel the same way whenever I like look back at my friends that have moved abroad. It's like it's always really lovely to, oh, you live in Barcelona? Yeah, I'm definitely going there just to visit you. It's
Right.
definitely not
And
just the city.
you've got someone there to at least like hang out with and go around and actually see the city and
Yeah.
experience it versus like, okay, well, here are the top three tours that you can go to in Barcelona.
Yeah, and they always have the nice spots. They know the
Yeah,
good steak places and the good
exactly.
hidden bars. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's
exactly.
definitely awesome. What's the craziest food you had in China?
So one of the companies that we didn't lose money on was we started importing American wine into China, and probably lost about 10 years off our liver doing that. But you get into a lot of wine dinners and tasting dinners and everything else like that. And as a foreigner, you get into these situations where it's like, hey, let's just see what weird shit the foreigner will eat. So snake, pigeon,
Gosh,
bugs, all that stuff. Like you get in these weird situations, and also like I think the benefit was we were, you know, young mid 20s to where we weren't going to say no to a challenge either. So like,
of
so then
course.
everyone was like leveling up. But yeah, there's been some interesting foods.
Okay, that's crazy. I was recently in Thailand and I had one of these like little bugs, the larvas.
Yeah, yeah,
Don't chew them, just swallow.
yeah,
If you chew, it's so much worse.
yeah.
Uh, and when you were in China, is that where you first started? Like, did you launch a business there, or were you working at an existing business of someone else's?
So where we were in Guangzhou is a big manufacturing hub. Guangzhou, Dongguan, there's a lot of textiles. Shenzhen, the city next door, right before Hong Kong, is more in tech and electronics. And so we just had like the Canton Fair, for example, was 3 miles away from where we were living. So we went to the Canton Fair the fall we had just moved over there and just got into sourcing and product development and manufacturing just because you were able to have a Westerner on the ground there. And so we just reached out to our network through family and friends and were able to scrounge, minimal business, whether it was like, hey, he needs iPhone cases made or this guy needs like tablet cases or anything else like that. We were able to get by just through that network. Um, but it was really more of a training ground of like, hey, this is how you make products. This is actually going to the factories. This is how it's actually done. You're not there on a scheduled tour. The cool thing about living out there is when something would go wrong, which it inevitably does within the supply chain, then you, instead of like you getting pissed off in an email or write something, you'd be like, okay, dude, I'll be there this afternoon. Right. And we'll go through and we'll sort it out. And so being able to be hands on there and like actually figure it out is a big DNA into why we are like wired the way we are. We're very curious. We like to figure out the details and everything we like to do. But it's a lot of because we were able to be out there and on the ground.
Okay, so you were creating your own opportunity. You were hustling for it. You were on the ground. You were finding the products from the producers and then calling
Yeah,
back home and being like, "All right, we have products. What do you need?"
yeah. Something we used to do because there were six of us and we paired off and each had like house like, different apartments throughout the city. Is that for a while, once a week, we would all meet up and then just brainstorm ideas of different businesses or different things that we could do.
Nice.
And so by doing that, then at least the juices would flow, and then someone would take the lead on like researching that and coming back with it, with the idea that like you have enough shots on goal and figure stuff out that like something may work. Um, Now, when you have six 22, 23-year olds that are all equally unqualified, that are all coming up with ideas, there's not a lot of like executional muscle that you can do, but a lot of it was just like learning and figuring it out. It was a good time to be living in China and figuring out supply chain and all that. And also we created a good network of expats out there that could also show us the ropes that we learned from, that we were able to kind of like step or follow in their footsteps. And okay, this is how you make silicone wrappings. This is how you do this. We had a close friend who, his dad's company, they just made, I think, widgets and bolts. And so they just like the most boring thing you could ever do, but you just move like shipping containers worth of boats on a monthly basis. It was like, wow, I didn't even
Jeez.
think that was a business. Right. And so
Yeah.
it gets your mind turning on, hey, these are all these different opportunities out there. These are different ways that people make a buck. How can you actually provide value within the business ecosystem?
Wow. Okay. Crazy. Do you remember the first deal you did in China? And how did that go? Like, I'm thinking language wise, was it easy?
Yeah, I mean, the first deal would have been minimal, like showing up at a trading floor or at like a trading company office and like getting an order for like 200 notebooks, right? Like paper notebooks with like a company logo on it. And that was like, oh, this is awesome, right? Like we're gonna scale this to the moon. Realistically, like we probably made like $700 off of it, right? Like definitely $700 also split 6 ways isn't the best way to like spend
That's
your
not a lot
time
of
doing
food.
it. No, no, well, we were living cheap. You're able to get by there. That was one of the things. We probably spending like $1 or $2 per meal. So you're able to get
Wow.
by. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of discipline learned through there. When we'd splurge, we would go to Subway and there'd be 6 kwai or like basically like dollar foot longs or dollar 6 inches. Um, that we'd be able to splurge on. And that'd be once or twice a week.
Okay, nice. So that was like the victory meal. Like, all right,
Yeah,
Subway.
exactly. And if you were feeling good, you would get a cookie as well.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's the
yeah.
luxury part.
That's the luxury. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, crazy, nice. And besides China, so I'm guessing like China obviously introduced you, it sounds like, to not only being an entrepreneur, but then also creating a really solid group, which you mentioned then
Mhm.
becomes like your founding group.
Mhm.
Like the first years of China, I imagine is like the learning curve is ridiculous. And then let's say you're now coming in on year three. What are you doing in China? Like the third year that you're all there together.
Third year, we were selling wine, and that was working. And we reached a point to where it was like, all right, for us to actually run this, we're gonna have to commit to living here. We're gonna have to commit to like building distribution further without like throughout southern China. It's gonna be a
Wow.
grind. And we had seen some people blowing up on Kickstarter. This would have been like 2012, 2013. And we're like, well, we already do the sourcing and the manufacturing. Why don't we just spin up our own brand on Kickstarter and just see what happens and see if the marketing messaging takes? And so that's how Vincero started. We actually moved back, spent the summer in Austin, Texas, um, built the campaign on Kickstarter, launched it. My two partners stayed in the States to figure out Facebook ads after we had launched it. I went back for the final year in China to build out our supply chain. Um, and kind of just, that's how we started. And that's how we really ran. And that's like how we became like an actual business is through Kickstarter and crowdfunding.
Okay, wow, amazing. I know that it's quite uncommon to hear about Kickstarters that actually make it out of like the initial launch site. So it seemed like you guys really had a good plan then.
Well, I think people look at Kickstarter, those, or my assumption is that those that fail probably have a different interpretation of what Kickstarter is, which is a marketing testing platform, right?
Uh,
We had the benefit of knowing how products were made because we had the product development expertise. So that wasn't a fear or a concern. The thing with Kickstarter is like, okay, how do we get this audience? How do we get people to buy and pre-order? How do we prove the concept? And then can we raise enough funds to put all that money into production? Um, and I think where you see a lot of Kickstarters struggle is that they don't understand the product. They don't understand the production line. It'll be like, hey, just heard from our suppliers and they say we can get this done in 3 weeks. And so we should have product to you in 6 weeks. And we're like, dude, no. Like that's not how this works. Like no, this is like this. So I think people go through that stage and they get discouraged by the product development side and dealing with the supply chain and understanding the intricacies of it. So that's where we were fortunate to be on that side of the coin.
Yeah, you already had a lot of advantage of understanding of, all right, this is what 3 weeks actually means, like
Right.
from door to door.
Yeah. Yeah. 3 weeks means they haven't started. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I recently went through something similar where I was ordering cardboard boxes, like these fancy boxes that I'm gonna put some
Hmm.
physical products in. And I was like, great, like that shouldn't take long. I'll just I'll email them and I'll be like, hey, can you send me like a prototype? Here's a
Right.
draft. And like,
Right.
yeah, we'll do that. You should have it soon. I was like, great. That was back in October. Now it's February. Still don't have the prototype.
Yeah. Yeah. So the difference being when you're out there and you're not getting a response, you just let them know like, hey, I'm going to be there on Thursday. So
Yeah.
and so you're able to like force your way through it. And doing that as well, you're able to build stronger relationships with the factory bosses. You're able to like understand the intricacies of how this, like who reports to who and where the decisions are made. You understand a lot about Guangxi and showing face. So
Yeah.
there's benefits towards being out there if you can handle it. But I wouldn't live in China again.
No?
No, that's a young man's game. It's a grind.
All right, but do you still like to this day? Do you still have your production chain over there?
Yeah, yeah. We still have a team out there that QCs everything, that oversees all of our procurement and everything else like that. We've got a great head of product at Vincero that's able to take the lead and run with a lot of the product development. She's expanded our product line beyond watches. She came with expertise with eyewear, and jewelry, so we've been able to go widen our product line and really focusing with Vincero on personalization and sentimentality and the idea that guys are impossible to gift for.
Yes.
So, like, however, if I get a watch for my birthday that's engraved with a special message that has more meaning, or, to celebrate dads and grads, or like my first kid being born, that sentimentality and that meaning has a lasting impact that's actually able to provide value than just like another watch, right? Or another bracelet.
I love that, and I love that you're kind of leading into kind of what most men think about when they want to give their spouse something, which is usually like we have a lot of options. We can go earrings, we can
Right.
go rings, we can go
Right.
necklace, we can go bracelet, and we also
Right.
have the watches. We have there's so many options, and not to even mention like handbags and wallets
Right.
and whatnot.
Right.
But a
Exactly.
guy has his wallet, and that's it. Like I
Yeah.
don't want another one.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The guys like jewelry, or I guess jewelry in general is hot now, so more people are wearing chains and bracelets and everything. But when we were actively like scaling hard, watches was the only piece of jewelry that guys wore. So
Mm.
it was a great sentimental gift that we were just able to leverage towards growth.
Yeah, yeah. And when you came on Vincero, how did you go about finding like a best-selling product? Because I think that for any D2C brand is usually like number one challenge. How do you find a product that really hits the home run?
Right. So we launched in 2014. Watches was a hot market to be in. So we launched with a watch. Then we started to like we made like messenger bags, we made duffel bags, we tried to get into leather. So we made belts, we made wallets. But then whenever we would launch another watch, because our customer base was already inherently watches, that was just an easier sell. So the idea was like, okay, let's be a watches first company. Let's have, watches as our hero product. And as you grow that up and as you keep providing value and like building that community that learn to appreciate the design, and even with us, we're learning more and more about how to make watches, how to make different types of watches, the different intricacies that are involved. And watches are a pain in the ass to make. There's a lot of detail, there's a lot of moving parts. There's 17 different suppliers that just go into like one actual watch. And so as you're growing up, as you're scaling that category, then what's a complementary product to watches? Bracelets make a lot of sense, right? Because that's something you're wearing with a watch. So if you're able to prove traction there, let's expand that into jewelry in general. Also, what also makes sense from an accessory standpoint, eyewear. Is there a cool way where we can create eyewear and provide value there that all looks and feels like a Vincero product?
Hmm. All right, so making sure that you take advantage of like, all right, this is what worked, and then you kind of double down and like if you were thinking of like a percentage of your resources and like mind space in product development, would you say it's like 50% goes into let's do more of this and 50% goes into experimentation phase? Or how do you like split that resource and time?
Yeah, I think it depends on the life cycle of where you're at, right? So if you're finding good product market fit, you can actively scale and create like iterations and versions of that same product without needing to go wider. But in order to have longevity and long-standing presence within the market, you're gonna want to be able to continue to innovate and figure out ways where you can find other hero products that can stand up on their own. So even within Vincero, we learned that like whatever product we make, for example, watches, we can sell watch straps as like an additive, but that's not really a product line extension, right? Like I'm not going to be able to build a business off of watch straps realistically, right? However, if we can prove traction within jewelry like bracelets and necklaces, that can build its own business, then you've got your own verticals and you've got more stability there. So that's how we looked at it, is like what products made sense, one, within our branding, and then two, that could justify themselves to be their own extension. If needed, or just in a theoretical world, could they be their own brand itself?
Okay, so it could just stand on its own feet, basically.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And it makes it a whole lot easier because as we're building Vincero, we were our target dem anyway. So it just made it like it turned into like what other cool shit did we want to make for ourselves? And then it was like, okay, cool, I want to make eyewear. It's like, okay, if we were to make eyewear, what would we do different about it? What do we like about it? What do we not like about it? Okay, let's dive into this. Let's see if we can prove traction. Being okay with like, yeah, it'll take some time. We want to reiterate and do everything else like that. But finding traction and finding actual momentum within these new product categories was the focus the past few years.
All right, and then when marketing comes into the picture, because obviously like product development is very important, making a good product is obviously super important, but then you have to get the word out there. So do you recall what you did in the beginning to make sure that Vincero was successful from like early on and then like kept that growing?
Yeah, early on, we were very fortunate to be launching in 2014 when Kickstarter blew up, and when Facebook was relatively easy. So that's like, we are very fortunate and lucky to be at that point when we were able to scale the company to that. And then you go wide, right? And you're able to figure out a marketing mix. It's like, okay, what other channels do make sense? Let's go outside of Facebook. Let's get into Google. Let's tap into influencer. Let's figure out like whatever else, podcasts. Like, do we want to make commercials? Like, we kind of did it all and ran the gambit. So a lot of it is like same sort of thing with the product development thing, right? It's testing, it's figuring out, iterating, like committing to a certain percentage of budget that you're comfortable with to test new platforms, new channels to make sure it makes sense. And then if you do see signs of success, how do we double down on that? How do we like follow that and pursue that to make sure that it is a real opportunity and not just like a flash in the pan?
That makes a lot of sense. And since obviously watches is somewhat of a high ticket item in some instances, like it's not like a $10 product, right? It's not like a supplement either that you might want this month and the next month.
Right.
How is that a challenge that maybe you guys tackled? You obviously mentioned the diversification into different verticals. Was that like the easiest way to go about it? Like, all right, we have our existing customer base. Let's see how they respond to these two verticals. Or did you use those verticals to find people into the best selling?
Yeah. So I think that was a mistake or a learning we made early on, is that my watch customer is not the same as my eyewear customer. It's a different purchase decision. It's like, and to expect those to be able to cross pollinate easily doesn't really work, right? So being comfortable with like watches at a certain size, and I speak to my watch customer a certain way. Eyewear customer, I have to learn to speak to them a certain way and build that within its own product category. But in order to have longevity, especially within watches, you really need to be able to build a community that like can rally around a story. And like true brand building is that tribe that can have a story built behind it, that really care about like the purpose and the mission. So we got really into cool limited editions, right? So if we've got our best sellers and like, you're able to reiterate and kind of flex your creative muscles and do limited drops, limited colorways, create some sort of scarcity to be able to like, for a reason to come back and purchase more watches, as well as we focused a lot on being able to personalize watches in general. So being able to engrave our watches and jewelry has been a huge unlock for us because it creates that sentimental moment and that gifting moment that just is that much more powerful, where we actually can like be in a very cool position in people's lives of the gift that, you know, you trust Vincero to be able to deliver on this gift towards, you know, a significant other or a relative.
Yeah, and I was watching your website as well, and I do think like price point is an extremely important thing. And I think when it comes to gifting, it's even more important because like if I give someone a champagne, I don't want to give them a shitty champagne, right?
Right. Right.
Because they'll know, and I know.
Exactly.
And then we're
Exactly.
staring
Yeah.
at each other's face and we're both like, this is a $10 bottle. It's like, all right, thanks. It's like, that's how
Right.
much it means to you.
Right.
So how do you go about finding a perfect price point for a gift?
Yeah. Well, I that's a if you again, we're our own core dem, so it's easy for us to assess value on like, okay, what's a gift for $100 that I would give someone? What's a gift for
Mm.
$300? What's a gift for 500? What's a gift for 1,000? And I think when we evaluated watches as like a gifting thing, there's plenty of options, right? But the style has to look cool. It's got to have good style. It's got to look unique. It's got the branding and the messaging has to vibe with like my personal style. And let's be honest, we can't all afford like $5,000 watches, right? So there's a core part of it that's aspirational, that it looks sophisticated. It doesn't look cheap. We have a very obviously a huge passion for product development and manufacturing, so we're extremely confident in the actual quality of build and materials and how to make products. So we know that we're over delivering on the actual product integrity itself. Um, we have a reputation within the watch factories within China of like being very difficult to work with because our team holds like a one-to-one QC standard. Like our team checks every single watch that comes off the line and we box it up ourselves before we ship it out, which when you're running that at scale, a lot of watch factories don't really like working with you because you're highlighting a lot of defects that most other brands don't mind. But having good product integrity and then also being able to, from a gifting standpoint of like, what would make this even cooler if I could like put happy birthday on the watch, right? Like then that's like an actual meaning thing of if there's a way that we can deliver that to customers and create that special moment and capture that moment, that meeting, then that's just an awesome gift for $200, right? 250 bucks, $300. Like, yes, this makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah. I think that makes a whole lot of sense. And now that you've been running Ventura for a while, how do you see the evolution of Ventura now moving forward?
It's exciting now because we are seeing a lot of traction within gifting and personalization and being able to capture those moments. So once you are able to find traction within like, okay, we are a gifting brand, it's totally revitalized how we approach product development from the jump to even now. It's like, okay, if I was receiving this as a gift, what would be the best way to receive it from a packaging standpoint? What would be involved in the packaging? What would the packaging look like? What are ways that I can highlight this, like the significance and the uniqueness of this product specifically as someone who's receiving it as a gift? So it goes back to the whole DNA of how you're building out your product line of, okay, these are how do we just like make killer gifts for guys? right? What's the best way to do this? And so we're able to tap in and expand a lot more on the little details to make things that much more significant.
Amazing. And that kind of reminds me of the Japanese gifting culture that they take ridiculously seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Going into like the smallest details, and if it's not handmade, like don't even give it to anyone. Like that's and whatever they give, they're like you're giving your soul away and you're receiving the soul of someone else, like even when it comes to business card trading. And yeah,
Right.
so
Right.
I can see that it sounds very unique angle that maybe not that many brands are taking that seriously today, and maybe got drop shipified,
Right. Right.
sadly, and very
Right.
unpersonal.
Yeah. That's a fair statement.
Um, but so for Vinci now, when it comes from your perspective of like obviously there was a huge boom during COVID for all ecom. I'm
Mhm.
guessing you were part of that boom as well. How have you guys handled the boom and maybe the deflation, or and now maybe is the traction coming back, or how's it looking for you guys? Was that even a thing?
Yeah, so the boom was there. I think what we realized during that boom is that watches as a product category was stalling out. We just
Mm.
we just I think when we like took out the COVID boost, when we were looking at our numbers, we're like, oh guys, this actually isn't trajecting. Like if we were still experiencing the natural growth and like there was just good headwinds and the market was still strong, we would be seeing more of an uptick. So with that, we were in a way fortunate because it forced us to pivot sooner because we realized what COVID was, right?
Mm.
It was a flash in the pan. It wasn't like the new normal. So we started um, becoming real, putting more of a focus on like our operational unit economics and making sure the business was foundationally sound. Because once that, 30, 40, 50% COVID spike dropped out, you're fucked. Right. So,
Yeah.
so like how do you prepare for that while still being optimistic? Like, okay, maybe this will last for a while longer, but also not being unrealistic and being like, well, no, this is fine now. Like, this is just the expectation that we're running this at this rate.
Yeah, and like also, I think a lot of people, like you say, they completely got fucked because they were doing the financial planning on that growth, which is completely erroneous. Um, and then they got slapped in the face with reality. It was like this was a one-time thing because everyone was at home.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And that also like led to like workforce changes, which is something that I know you've been trying to solve with Tidal as well, where you can really like once COVID came around, it became more normal. Like I'll work from home, you'll work from home. Maybe I'll
Yes.
find someone else who's not even in a home in this country.
Right.
Uh, did that come about during COVID, or did COVID just help it?
It's we reached a point where we were like, okay, we're either going to be an in-office culture or we're going to be a remote culture within Vincero. And then we're like, okay, we've got 17 full-time employees in San Diego. This is a burden to manage. Again, we were never had any, never really had a real job before, so I'm probably not the best manager. Um, so it was like, okay, let's go fully remote. And the idea was we were tired of our top level talent getting poached, and we couldn't afford to pay more because our P&L was already bloated from like an optimized standpoint, because we were staffed to a point where like, okay, let's continue this hockey stick growth. But then the realization is like, okay, if this levels out, and your P&L is still at this level, you're going to have to figure out a way to go there. So our top level talent, we couldn't afford to hire. So we addressed that mid-level bloat. And the idea was like, okay, well, if we're going remote anyway, why not just go globally? With
Mm.
the idea that like ecom itself had already matured from a global perspective. We were already inherently a global company. We built our supply chain out in China. We built our customer service team out in the Philippines very early on. So the thesis was that like, okay, well, what about these roles that are like now in the US 70K a year, realistically now with inflation like 80K a year, where they're well, I call them the revolving door roles, right? Where it takes you 6 months to find someone, they're going to jump on board. There's going to be a solid output for a year or two, but then they're going to either going to age out of what that role is, or the salary expectations from what you can provide as a small company just aren't going to align. And then all of a sudden, like you're stuck rehiring that role. So when you do that in all these different functions, whether it's content marketers or it's data analysts or it's like ecom managers or logistics managers, it's just exhausting, right? So within Title, the idea was like, okay, well, let's just figure out a way to take that mid-level specialist. Let's provide top of market wages. We're just going to hire it in the Philippines and Latin America, where you're able to, get an extremely solid hire for 70% in cost savings. Let's take it from the perspective of founders who've run a business themselves. So they know the ins and outs of what to look for from a hire and everything else like that. That's a lot of value that you could actually provide to other e-com brands and agencies that are struggling with this same problem.
Yeah, and I saw on Title's website, for example, you have people in Colombia, and like my wife's from Colombia, so I actually know like a bit about what's the average wage in Colombia, and
Right.
I know like a normal person getting a normal salary that's around like $400-500 maybe. So
Right.
should you pay them like $1,000, $2,000, $3,000? That's like crazy money over there.
Exactly. Well, and that's the empowering thing, and that's where it feels like you're removed from the matrix because you're then all of a sudden able to be like, well, I only want to hire top of market talent, right? But what is top of market talent out there? It's like, okay, well, that's, let's say, $2,500 a month, and you're able to get someone who's been, who's one, stoked at the opportunity. It's more money than they'd make elsewhere. Two, it's a great opportunity for them, and it's a change of scenery. They're working directly with a brand. They just have more autonomy, and you're just able to provide a great opportunity for them. And then from your standpoint as the brand or the agency that's hiring, then you're able to be like, okay, dude, I've got this person in this function where I was having to pay 6-7 grand a month for, that I was dealing with a lot of, just like, and it's no fault to that person that would be hired in the States. Like they're still growing, they're maturing and everything else like that. But the lie I think we've told ourselves is that like we have every company has the capacity and the bandwidth to be able to have that time horizon to train and tutor and mentor those specific roles. So if you're able to find some stability in those roles that are constantly causing you headaches, then you can focus more not only on, you have all of a sudden you have budget for high level strategic hires, but then you're able to just have more stability to get back to growing the brand.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's also like a really important message in terms of, sure, you can try to grow the revenue of a company, but let's say you're in a Corona time and then you know that this is a one-time thing, and then employees are getting poached left and right, and you're like, all right, this is just gonna be a long-term problem then.
Right.
Um, and
Right.
then the market's gonna come crashing down.
That, well, like how can you always stay on the offensive? Right. And I think with what we experience within Vincero is that if we just have confidence that regardless of, maybe our top level performance marketer does get poached, but we've got stability on these foundational roles to where we can plug someone in, there actually is like infrastructure and a setup to go there. Whereas I think where you get in the trap is if you've got a really good like performance marketer and they have their way of doing things and they've got their own like blueprint on how to do that, they get poached and removed. Then it's like, oh shit, like now we got to figure out how it works. Like, what do I do? Do I hire this agency? This agency isn't as dynamic as a full-time hire. I'm still going to have this agency, and then someone's got to manage the agency. So how do we just handle it all? And when you're already trying to run a business, it's tough enough. And then like the staffing issue is just an added headache that we figured out a process and a blueprint for the best way to do it. So now we can just help other people get through that. And we just leverage those global hires and just the lower cost of living in these established, highly educated markets that are good for ecom. It just seems to be a win-win.
Yeah, that's amazing. And how do you see the trajectory of Tidal now?
We started only in the Philippines, and that was a couple years ago. We've been expanding into Latin America this past year. I have a long term. We've started to hire a few sales reps in South Africa. So we're
Okay.
expanding there. And so the idea with the trajectory within Title is that let's just look at, granted, let's acknowledge you can find great talent anywhere, right? So this isn't like a specific generalization, but like what gives you the best odds of success of building a global team if you can do all these different chess pieces and like you can, I can find a great tech developer in Eastern Europe. I'm going to pair them with a good project manager that's based down in Latin America. I want 24 hour a day churn with all of my graphic and my creative. So I'm using AI, and I've got someone in the Philippines, and I've also got someone in Latin America. So they're able to work in tandem off each other and run 24 hours. Basically, it's so empowering because any task, function, or role where it's like you still need someone in that seat to oversee it, and you still need some output, but it's like 80% production and 80% execution. You're able to cost optimize that and put them in different parts of the world, and really build out this global team that has like your P&L should like labors 7% of your P&L, and you're just fully empowered on being able to like, it can be 7% if I'm at 5 million, it can be 7% if I'm at 50 million. Like I'm able to staff up accordingly.
That's amazing. That's a huge win, I think. And I'm totally with you on that. Like now that we truly are a global economy and you can trade things between borders without any issues,
Right.
trading talent between borders shouldn't be an issue either.
Well, and I think what we experienced is that the biggest problem with global talent is accountability, right? And job hopping is a common thing where it's like, at the end of the day, like I'm just going to find a different opportunity. And then if you rely too much on that, then all of a sudden, like if you're doing it yourself, you're like, dude, I just wasted so much time trying to find this person. They're a needle in a haystack. Now I got to go out and find that person again. Where Title comes in, it's like, dude, we got you. Like we'll cover you. We'll figure it out. We'll find that person. You don't have to worry about it. You've got a founder, brand owner mindset that is built like the system, so we're able to be your eyes and ears, and I can level with you from like a brand operator standpoint closer than other recruitment agencies or talent agents that we experienced in the past. The closest like analogy I can give is that talent agents or recruiters are kind of like talent scouts. So it's like this guy can run fast, this guy can jump really high, this guy's got a good 40 time, this guy kicks the ball super far, right? So on paper, that's who you need to hire. Whereas within Title, it's kind of like you've got a GM at the top that can help play Moneyball with you and be like, okay, no, but for your organization, for your system, you don't need that guy that can jump that high. You need someone that can do this, this, and this. We're able to combine what you thought was 3 roles down to 2 roles, where increase your
Yeah.
output. And then from there, it probably makes sense to use someone like this. And so it's fun because you're able to like build a roster together.
It's almost like having partner slash board member pick your team.
Right. Well, and it's more of, I think where we sit in the market is that we know what's available. And that's also the toughest part of like, yo, can you find and I get texts all the time from other brands. It sounded cocky, but where it's like hey, can you like should I hire a media buyer offshore? And then it's like, okay, well, do you have a dialed creative process and strategy? Do you have someone that can actually set metrics? If so, yes. If not, no. Find a good creative strategist, then plug in an offshore hire. So being able to have even that clarity is really what we're able to provide.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing as well is don't just hire someone offshore because it's cheaper. Make sure you can actually plug them into someone who can manage them efficiently and bring whatever knowledge they have offshore into your operations efficiently.
Correct. Correct. Which is when we say global hiring, like we can also help hire strategic hires in the US as well. So you're able to like, but the idea is that we're agnostic to the region, wherever it makes sense and wherever you have the highest probability that you like, wherever the highest probability of talent pool related to like what you're looking for, you're able to canvas those markets. So even just like, okay, for a certain monthly pay band, it makes sense probably from what your budget and what you want to pay, we can definitely find that person, but it might only make sense to find them in the Philippines. Whereas if we go up in pay, we can search the Philippines and parts of Latin America, and then you're able to have a better talent pool And then based on those, you're able to make a decision because one, you're going really high top of market from the Philippines, right? You're able to provide the best cream of the crop. But if you're concerned about time zone differences or anything else like that, we still found, great talent within Argentina or Colombia or Brazil that fits your requirements and your specifications. So you're able to just like basically have it all, right? Like you're able to maximize your cost, your value that you're getting per role by hiring globally.
That's amazing. Um, I know we've gone on now for a long time, and it's been a great discussion. And I have a question that would love to ask everyone who's on this, which is, since we're called the Humble Venture,
Mm-hmm.
was there ever a time that you feel that you really got humbled, and anything that you would like to stay more humble within?
Um, the yeah, so the Vincero Row had a lot of tailwinds for the first part of the company scaling. And you don't realize that you have tailwinds until they're not there anymore. And it's almost like you went out to sea and you got this boat and you're just building this boat and you're hopping from island to island and you're adding more shit to it, right? You've got this, and then all of a sudden it's really easy to sail and you're going. And then you hit a point where the wind stops and you're just stuck out at sea and you're like, okay, wait, first off, where are we going? like what's the direction? What's the end goal? Um, does everything we have, is that like all of this shit that we've collected, does this get us to that end goal? And so then having the humility and that self-reflectiveness of like, okay, what makes sense? What do we have to do? What's in the best interest for this ship to continue and get on that point? Okay, we're going to have to let go of aspirations, or we're not going to be brick and mortar. We're not going to have wholesale. We're not going to have a footprint there. It doesn't make sense for us to have a 3PL in the Netherlands. Like we can do the same thing. And so being able to be okay with like being a smaller size was like a very, or not even smaller size, I would say, when you're doubling growth year over year, and then all of a sudden that slows down, you feel this weird insecurity of like, oh, what's wrong? Something's broken. We got to fix it. And then it's more like, dude, maybe this is like the appropriate size of the business, and this is the side saying that like this is what makes sense, and the only way that you're able to provide to get that business to grow is if you prove that you're providing value to your customers, and there is that organic growth, right? And then once you're hitting that 15-20% growth year over year, and it's like, okay, yeah, this feels right, this makes sense. That's like a long-winded way of we did like throughout 10 years, like we lost the tailwinds, right? And so being able to so I think with that as well, we were at the point where it was like, oh, what do we do with this brand? Like, do we sell it? Do we do it X, Y, and Z? And then it was more of like, no, you guys probably have to roll your sleeves up and get back to like figuring out how to make the brand work again.
Find more wind.
Exactly. So, and the only way to do that is to get hands on, like I remember launching Vincero. I spent Thanksgiving in the factories eating like $2 noodles with all the factory workers because we were QCing all the watches because we had to get them out at a certain point in time. So like I was just in there with them, like with the rest of the team in the factory, like QCing watches, like being willing to have that mentality of like, dude, we'll just do what it takes, right? And as long as you have an integrity and you're trying to do the right thing, you have confidence in what you're doing. Just having confidence that the end goal will work out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Getting your hands dirty is so important, I think.
Yes.
And everyone sees it as well when like the founders and the upper management are like, all right, we're getting our hands dirty with you. I think it's also a huge morale boost.
Right.
Like, all right, we're in this together. This is one ship rowing one direction.
Right. And I think a learning we had as well is when we get our hands involved, figuring out how to correctly manage and delegate expectations with those around us so that they didn't feel like they were getting in our way or they knew when to step in. And from a founder's perspective, that's difficult to articulate at a lot of times, like explaining the why, or like, no, I'm just stepping in for this brief period of time because I need to get from here to here, and having that patience to explain it, and people either comprehend and they get it or they don't. But that, as long as you make that intent of like, listen, this is why I'm doing this. This is where we need to go. At the end of the day, I always tell whoever we work with is like, your job is to take my job away from me, right? Like that's where you're in a very good position to where like your growth within this company is capped at the capacity of like, you can take more and more responsibility off my shoulders because there's other stuff we want to be able to do and build. And so finding the people that understand that and get that and are willing to like deal with the ebbs and flows and understand that has been a huge unlock for us as well.
I think you nailed it. And that's actually an advice I got from one of the best managers I've ever had. Shout out to Brigitte, which was, she told me, don't solve your problems, solve my problems, because they are your problems too.
Right. Right.
And that just kind of gave me this like, oh, think of it as if it's your business. And when you start doing that, like under upper management, you're like, oh, wait, I can actually solve way more than I thought and make myself more efficient to unlock way more potential for everyone.
Well, that, and it's like, dude, we're just making this shit up as we go, right? Like we don't have a clear playbook of this is X, Y, and Z. E-com changes so fast, like it's such a fluid industry that it's more of like, just because we did it that way 6 months ago, it's because it was solving this problem. Like we weren't just doing it, right? Like we were trying to solve this problem. So let's say we focus on we understand the problem we're trying to solve, and we trust you to be able to use your best efforts to solve that.
Yeah.
Run with it.
And now there's AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, geez. Sean, do you have any shout outs? This has been really awesome. I've really enjoyed this. Do you have any shout outs? Obviously, check out Vincero, check out Tidal. Is there anything else that you would love to plug out to the world?
I'm going to sound I can't think of anything. We've been very fortunate in, my partners, Tim and Aaron, we've known each other since like we were 18. And we've been able to manage a relationship of like being able to build the businesses together and then also stay best friends. And I think a lot of that integrity and that like emotional maturity reflects on our team and who we hire as well. Because being able to have those conversations and understand that like it's, at the end of the day, we assume good intent, and we're like always trying to like do what we think is best. We've been very fortunate that the people that work with us now and have worked us, I think we always try to hire good people and with good integrity. And sometimes it's a situation where it's the right person, the company just changes. But focusing on the integrity of people and can I trust these people with the business and with responsibility? Because at the end of the day, from a founder's mindset as well, like these businesses are our babies. They're our life's work. They're a reflection of who we are and what we've accomplished. So us trusting you to operate hopefully is a vote of confidence that we value you just as much as you value us, if not more.
That's a beautiful note to end it on, and I couldn't agree more. It becomes something very closely attached to you, and it's like giving someone the keys to your house.
Right. For sure.
All right, I'll stop the recording here.
And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of The Humble Venture, the podcast where you get thoughts directly from industry leaders, business professionals, entrepreneurs, and high-performing talent. So if you liked the episode, please give it a like, follow us, and give us a little comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts on if you like the episode, if you have any feedback, if we should bring on any other guests, or if we should ask them something differently. If you need help with paid media, marketing, or anything else related to digital, please let us know. That's what we do. We're the best at it. You can check us out at humbleventuregroup.com. Our talent comes directly from Google, Meta, TikTok, and many other really great places. So give it a check, humbleventuregroup.com. Thank you so much again, and stay humble.